Okay, this is the lesson on commas, and it's one of the longest lessons you'll encounter in this course. Um, there are lots of different comma rules and a lot of like little exceptions and things like that, but I want to cover in this lesson the 8 most common comma rules. Okay, commas actually are important. They affect the meaning and readability of a sentence. Now, to kind of show a funny and dramatic example of this, let's look at this sentence here. Let's eat Grandpa. That reads differently than this version. Let's eat, Grandpa. So in that case, you can see that a comma saved Grandpa's life. It changes the rhythm and the flow of the sentence, and it affects how we hear it and how we read it. And that's basically what commas do. They are inserted in sentences to have an effect on how we read, and how we read affects the meaning. Okay, so let's get on with the 8 rules. The first rule is what I call the fanboys rule. Fanboys stands for these coordinating conjunctions. We met these in the chapter on parts of speech. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. And so the rule here is when 2 independent sentences or independent clauses are joined by a fanboys conjunction, a comma should be placed before that conjunction. For example, some toy dolls promote unrealistic body images among young girls, yet toy companies continue to market these products without restraint. Okay, there's no comma there. Can you see where the comma would go? Okay, first we need to find that conjunction, that coordinating conjunction, and there it is. It's yet. That joins these 2 independent clauses. And so the question to ask is just kind of a rule of thumb. Ask yourself if what follows the fanboy conjunction could stand alone as a complete sentence. Okay, and if the answer is yes, then you place a comma before the conjunction. If the answer is no, then you don't. So let's try it out with this. There's the conjunction. It's yet. Read what comes after it. Toy companies continue to market these products without restraint. Is that a complete sentence? And the answer is yes, it is. So in this case, we would put a comma there between girls and yet. So let's look at a couple more examples. So incorrect is the resort offers tennis and golf for adults, and the kids will enjoy the water park. Okay, we can see how the meaning, without any commas, the meaning kind of gets thrown off here a little bit. The resort offers tennis and golf for adults and the kids. At that point we think that tennis and golf is also for the kids, but then we see, oh, the kids will enjoy the water park. And so find the conjunction here that is joining the 2 independent clauses. And then ask yourself if what follows is a complete sentence. So and is the conjunction. The kids will enjoy the water park. That is a complete sentence, so it does require a comma there. If what follows is not a complete sentence, then it would not take a comma. The resort offers tennis and golf for adults and a water park for kids. If we look at what comes after there, a water park for kids is not a complete sentence, so therefore a comma would not go before the conjunction. Sometimes if the 2 independent clauses that are being joined by the conjunction, if they're very short, then sometimes the comma can be omitted. This rule can be omitted. So for example, dogs are forgiving and cats are indifferent. There's really no need for a comma in that short of a sentence, where these short clauses are just being combined there. Okay, the next rule is the dependent clause rule. So the rule here is when a sentence begins with a dependent clause, use a comma to separate it from the independent clause, or in other words, the rest of the sentence. Now remember from the chapter on parts of speech, here are a few common what are called subordinating conjunctions, but the idea is just get a sense of these words, and whenever a sentence begins with one of these words on this list, and these are just some common ones, there are more than this, but whenever a sentence begins with one of these words, you just need to know that there will be a comma. So normally these subordinating conjunctions function like this. They join two parts of a sentence. So in this example, we can see how that subordinating conjunction comes in the middle of the sentence. I will bite you if you come any closer. But if we were to start the sentence with that subordinating conjunction, it becomes like this. If you come any closer, I will bite you. And that's where we need the comma. Okay, so you can just, based on that list that we just looked at, you could make up sentences beginning with those subordinating conjunctions, and you'll just hear the pause. You'll hear where a comma would go in those. Whenever I make up a sentence that starts with a subordinating conjunction, I know it needs a comma. So in that example, I did start that with a subordinating conjunction whenever, and that's where the comma goes. Unless I get a nap in the afternoon, I can be quite grumpy. You can kind of hear the pause. And that is the place where that subordinate clause ends and the new independent clause begins. That's where the comma goes. And you don't necessarily need to know that jargon to get this. You can hear the rhythm of the sentence. Okay, the third comma rule, introductory words and phrases. Place a comma after a word or expression that introduces a sentence. These words usually indicate a transition or provide commentary on the sentence that follows. So that's the rule. Again, as with all these grammar rules, it's best to see how it works in examples. So introductory words and phrases look like this. Finally, the check arrived in the mail. Unfortunately, it is not what you know, but who you know. Okay. You can just look at some more examples here. So when we have these words that are introductory words, they don't always need a comma, only when they're functioning as a word that's introducing the sentence. So if we have this, next in line to be CEO is our former coworker, Sally Brown. That's not an introductory word, but the word next used this way is, and you can just hear the difference. Next, press the gas pedal to the floor and hold on for your life. In that case, it is functioning as an introductory word. So introductory phrases function the same way. You place a comma after the phrase that introduces or leads to the main part of the sentence. So this rule also applies in a similar way to the dependent clause rule that we just looked at. For example, kissing in the display window, the couple drew quite a crowd. Kissing in the display window, the couple drew quite a crowd. With that in mind, we can move forward with a proposal. Again, you can just hear the pause in there. Okay, the fourth rule, follow-up elements. So in this rule, you place a comma before a word or phrase at the end of a sentence that serves as kind of an afterthought. And often these afterthoughts are just short follow-up questions. So first example here is, it is the first house on the left, I believe. You can see how that little phrase at the end was kind of tagged on to the end of the sentence. I love getting gifts for Valentine's Day, don't you? The house was quiet, almost too quiet. Okay, and you see that the comma with these follow-up phrases actually serves to emphasize that last follow-up phrase. If it weren't in there, it would just kind of blend in with the rest of the sentence and it wouldn't have quite that rhythm and dramatic effect. Okay, fifth rule, items in a series. Use a comma to separate 3 or more items in a series. Okay, these items can be single words or whole phrases. So my high school buddies and I went to France, Spain, and Italy after we graduated. So we have a list there. Tomorrow I need to wash my laundry, pay the bills, and buy some shoes. In that case, the list is a series of phrases. Okay, a common error with these lists is to a common error associated with items in a list rule is to put the comma before the list starts. So in this incorrect example, I'm looking for a partner who is trustworthy, caring, and funny. I mean, you can see that the pause does not really work there. And so the correct is you start the commas after the first item in the list. And also just a note on using a comma between the last 2 items on the list. That's called the Oxford comma. And some style guides call for the Oxford comma, others do not use the Oxford comma. If you're writing professionally, you'll need to follow the style guide for whatever publisher you are working for. But as far as this workbook is concerned, we do use the Oxford comma. Or in other words, that comma between the last 2 items in the list that are separated by and. Another thing to know about the use of commas in a list is that a semicolon has an important function here to avoid confusion in what are called complex lists. So confusing is last summer I traveled to New York, Paris, France, Rome, Italy, and Moscow, Russia. And then we kind of say, oh, I see, we're talking about cities and countries there in the last part of the list. It starts out with just New York. And so in a complex list like that, if we separate those items by a semicolon, then we can see that Paris, France are paired, Rome, Italy is paired, and then Moscow and Russia is paired. Okay, rule number 6 has to do with non-essential interrupting words and phrases. Okay, so the rule here is to place a comma around a word or phrase that meets these 2 conditions. First, that word or phrase is additional information that's not necessary for the sentence to make sense. Okay, so that's the one thing. The second thing is that word or phrase has to interrupt the regular flow of the sentence. So if it meets those conditions, then you can put commas around it. It's an interrupting word or phrase. And these commas, you could almost imagine them functioning like parentheses. Like this is just additional side information that has been interjected into the sentence. Let's look at some examples. We cannot, however, allow them to launch another attack. So that meets the criteria of it interrupts the flow of the sentence and it's not necessary information. This is the first time, I believe, we have been faced with layoffs. It meets both criteria. It interrupts the flow of the sentence, and we could take it out. We could say, this is the first time we have been faced with layoffs, and that would still make sense. So it's unnecessary information, grammatically unnecessary. It might be good still to put in there, but the sentence does not rely on it, and it interrupts the flow of the sentence. Go ahead and take a look at those other 3 examples. Okay, so rule number 7, dates and places. Initially, you place a comma between the city and the state or the nation. That's the first part of this rule pertaining to places. So I grew up in Billings, Montana. They went on their honeymoon to Paris, France. Okay, if it's in the middle or the beginning of a sentence, the comma goes after the state or nation as well. I grew up in Billings, Montana during the 1980s. Okay, with dates, you place the comma between and after the date and year. So, America declared independence from Britain on July 4th, 1776. Okay, and you can see there on that second example, if it comes at the beginning or the middle, that just like in the rule with the places, you put the comma after. Okay, the last rule, finally. You place commas around the person or group directly addressed in the sentence. So if the person is being referred to but not addressed directly, no comma is needed. We'll look at the difference between those. In this first example, if I'm talking to Mandy, then I'm directly addressing her, and her name needs to be set off. So it'd be, first of all, Mandy, you need to spend more time doing homework. I'm talking to Mandy in that sentence, and her name kind of interrupts the flow of the sentence. Sarah, please accept my apology for forgetting about our date. But in this last example, you see that David is being referred to, not addressed directly. It's not addressed to him. It does not require a comma. Just, I wonder if David will come to my party on Saturday. No comma is necessary there. Okay, in general, it's probably pretty difficult to achieve absolute perfection with commas, mainly because not all of the rules are hard black and white rules. It has a lot to do with following your ear and helping your reader read your text with rhythm. And so you use your best judgment. There's kind of a saying that says, when in doubt, leave it out, because there can be a tendency to overcompensate with commas. When students are very conscious of their comma usage, they can just kind of sprinkle commas all over the writing and hope they go in the right place. Don't do that. Commas are there to create clarity, to create rhythm, and so kind of follow your instincts there, but use these 8 rules as strong guidelines to help improve the rhythm and flow of your text.